Welcome back to the PreVetted Podcast, where we spotlight extraordinary people and remarkable talent reshaping our world. Today, I am joined by Cameron Dutro, now software engineer, technical leader at Cisco Meraki, to explore into the future of ViewComponent, the relentless churn in JavaScript tooling, and why so many tools feel like thin sliced, incomplete solutions rather than a cohesive framework. We'll also share some nostalgia from the last RailsConf, which we both attended, and what this moment means for the Rails community moving forward. Hello, Cameron. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Federico, thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I try to make a short intro because you have so many projects and so many things doing that going on that it was too much to put into a short intro.
All good. Yes, I think just like most developers of a certain age, maybe, or even just all developers, I always have like a million side projects and things I'm exploring and interested in. So for sure, yeah, lots of stuff going on always.
Yes, and the you end up being like at least it happens to me that I end up being like multifaceted with multiple things going on in my life that depending on the context, I have to pick and choose what experience should I share to introduce myself or to say what I'm doing, right?
That's right. Yes, for sure. Yeah, trying to be selective because otherwise, yeah, I mean, I'm sure you could talk for, an entire 24-hour chunk of time on all the things you've done in your career and all the things you've worked on and projects you've started and maybe finished, maybe not, right? Yeah.
Yes. I'm doing so many things from coding to entrepreneurship to raising a family, raising a kid, and sharing all those experiences. So I feel that something is overwhelming, right? So I try to be selective, and then when I find somebody has a shared experience, then I can share like my experience with parenthood or my experience running an overland off-road community, right? Or so many things. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, you mentioned parenthood, and that's also I'm also a parent. I have two daughters, and as a result of that, have just found much less time to dedicate to things like side projects and even home improvement projects and whatnot. It's hard to find time for those things because the family just takes up so much time. But at the same time, it's also I count myself very lucky that I get to spend as much time with my family as I do. So, I don't think I would really change anything, but I definitely have less time to spend on side projects and things. And like you said, you really have to choose, kind of where you're putting your free time because you have so many constraints on that time as a parent that, yeah, just where does my time go? Do I finish the home improvement project? Do I finish the programming project? I got to file my taxes. there's always something else to do,
Yes, and organizing all that takes a lot of time.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Congratulations on your two daughters.
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you. Congratulations on your children as well.
Yeah, thank you.
How many children do you have?
So I have one 10-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm also his coach, karate coach. I share custody with the sensei.
Sure.
He's actually he's actually the coach, and I support him. So eventually I became a coach of my son and all the other kids there, right? So yeah,
that's great.
And
that's awesome.
And as you mentioned, he invited me to, you can build your dojo, you can have your students and whatnot. And even though it sounds interesting, I had to reject because I'm with traveling. I cannot keep that schedule, right? And and it's hard to do that. Yeah. So I said I cannot take that commitment, but I'm happy to support your dojo on so many things, right? So
definitely, yeah.
So let's start by talking about your new role at Cisco Meraki. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Yes, yes, that's been a really good experience so far. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, yes, I learned recently, so I wanted to acknowledge that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I
Oh.
I met Alan and Fito
Hmm.
from
Hmm.
that company, and they are amazing. So so far I
Yes,
had.
Alan Vito, awesome resources to have at the company for sure. I work on the core product dashboard team, so we work primarily like so Cisco Meraki for if your listeners don't know is I think Alan has described it as the what does he call it? The largest Rails app you've never heard of. So I don't know how many lines of code it is, but it's very large, extensive, and it's designed to power this dashboard. There's multiple sort of aspects to Meraki, but the one that I work on is this Rails app that is the dashboard for all of the Meraki products that you might own as an enterprise. So we're talking about network switches and access points and security, like firewalls, things like that, that are all managed in this dashboard. And the idea is that normally if you bought a normal Cisco switch from like a traditional switch, you would usually configure that via the command line. You sort of have to know exactly what you're doing. You have to have a lot of training and knowledge about how those things work. And Cisco Meraki products are much more turnkey than that. So the idea is that you just plug it in and then it appears in the dashboard and you can configure it via this really easy web UI. And so there's just a lot less sort of knowledge or like there's a lot less ability to shoot yourself in the foot because you've got this UI kind of guiding you through the process of setting up your device and getting it connected and, you know, allowing users to access it, things like that. So yeah, so that's the dashboard. Internally, it's called Manage. It's just the manage side of the coin. So there's also firmware and there's, of course, product development and all that stuff as well. Um, yeah, I've been really enjoying it. The company has like, I think, so many like Rails devs that you've probably heard come onto podcasts before and give talks and things. Like Jason Sweat, for example, works there now. I hope I'm not outing him or whatever. But he, I did, it was amazing. He like reached out in Slack and he goes, "Oh my gosh, you work here now too, right?" Like so, lots of sort of Rails devs you've heard of probably work there now. And yeah, I just found it's a great sort of place to be if you like to push Rails and Ruby forward. So yeah, definitely having a great time there.
Yes, I think they're doing something very interesting, and Alan described it as basically they set it up so it becomes magic to
Yes,
set up new devices. Yeah,
right. Yeah, they
yeah,
talk about the Meraki magic during the onboarding process, and yeah, that's all about just making sure things work when you first plug them in, right? Like the plug and play concept of like the 1990s or whatever or 2000s, but like brought to network technologies. Yeah.
right, right. And so yeah, he did a talk I think in April about that.
Hmm.
I think it was the same day I did a talk about
Yes, that's right.
stimulus.
At
Yeah.
the meetup, yeah, SF Ruby meetup, right?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah. By the
I
way, shout out to that. If folks aren't aware, the SF Ruby meetup is back and better than ever. So I think it's sfruby.com, I think, and you can find links to the Luma and all that. There's a meetup every month now, and yeah, it's been great. Federico has spoken, and Alan and I have as well. So yeah, if you're in the area, check us out.
eh, I don't know exactly when it started, but this year I've been going pretty much to all of them, and every year it's getting better and better and better. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, it's amazing. Last
for sure.
last last one I think was last week. We went to
Yes.
Figma,
Hmm.
um, and they talk about how they use Sinatra and Active Record
Yes, that's
on
cool.
yeah on their internal
I I
tools.
unf- I missed that one. Unfortunately, I'll have to go back and watch the recording. That's really cool.
Yes, yes, and and then you can have bragging rights of saying I've been to the Figma office, right?
Right.
Yeah, beautiful
Exactly.
office by the way. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's cool. I'm sorry I missed it. I was been traveling and whatnot for various things. Yeah, I think like Cisco is or not Cisco, Figma is so interesting in general because I think they use like a C++ compiled to WebAssembly for like their front end experience. And then I didn't even realize the backend was Rails. But that makes sense. I mean, Rails is really good at that kind of thing.
Sinatra. They're using
Oh,
Sinatra
sorry,
and
sorry,
Active
Sinatra.
Record.
Yes, right.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
should say Ruby. Ruby. Yes.
yeah.
Cool.
And here's the interesting thing: they built interfaces without JavaScript, with pure Ruby, without HTML, pure Ruby objects that they become interface.
Interesting.
That was very
I'm really
interesting.
gonna have to read that or watch that talk. Yes.
Yes.
That sounds like it's right within like the things that I like to think about these days.
That's why I mentioned it, because I think
Yeah.
you'll like it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Take a look at it.
And I was thinking, well, that should be extracted as a gem or package or something, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
So let's talk a little bit about you did a talk at RailsConf, right? Recently, it was a month ago, 2 months ago, and you introduced this concept of omasake, right? Omakase.
Oh, Omakase. Yeah.
Omakase.
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't introduce that. That was something that that DHH kind of. I mean, he didn't come up with it either. It's just a Japanese concept, I think. But he wrote this blog post in 2012 that kind of it was a big topic of conversation back in those days, and it perfectly sort of described his philosophy of Rails. That, and again, just in case listeners aren't familiar with this, the idea is that an omakase restaurant, instead of going into this restaurant and ordering food from a menu, you go into the restaurant and the chef just gives you food. They determine what you eat. They set the menu and the courses and everything that happens. You just kind of sit there and eat what they give you. And the idea is that the chef knows what you want, essentially because I think that they, I'm sure there's lots of different methodologies of doing this, but the idea is that they sort of know, what goes well together. They know that like this sake pairing and this nigiri or whatever go well together. And so they serve you those things in combination so that, you're having the best possible experience eating the food. And Rails is the same way. It's the idea is like, a bunch of people got together, DHH being one of them, and they know all the different pieces that make for a tasty full stack framework, and they give those things to you, and they're all configured to work together. And so you, as the end user or the end diner, I suppose, the person at this restaurant, the Rails restaurant, you're eating of this pre-made, pre-decided meal, where everything is sort of paired correctly together so that you have the best experience possible, right? And the opposite of this is okonomi, which is like ordering from a menu where you make all the decisions. So yeah, that I did not come up with that term. That was a term that's been around for a long time that DHH, made popular in the Rails community via this very, very seminal, I would say, 2012 blog post.
Yes. I mispronounced it. I said you introduced it during the talk, but yes, I agree. It was mentioned before. Cool. And the issue is that if you have too many choices, then you have paralysis, right?
Yes, that's right.
And that's kind of, the issue that we have right now on the front end side, right? Where we have so many options on the JavaScript ecosystem. None of them has this concept of omakase as we have in Rails, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And when you were giving that talk about that, I you kind of forget. Well, I kind of forgot, and you remind me why I love Rails so much, right? And it's that omakase thing that allows you to be very productive, and when you need to override, you can, but all the choices are already made, so you can focus on making choices for what you're building rather than everything else, right?
Exactly. That's right. Yes. You're not focused on sort of all of the setup and all of the ceremony around, I don't know, connecting to a database, or what's a good example? Scheduling a background job. Like those things are things the Rails team has identified that 99% of applications are going to need. And so they bake in solutions to those things so that you don't have to think about like, oh, I'm going to go spend a day researching background job queue libraries, No, you don't need to worry about that. I mean, you might want to swap in, one or the other. Like you might want to use rescue or delayed job or whatever else. There's lots of choices there. But those things, the actual like the interface for connecting to that is already decided for you. You can swap in whichever one you want. So there's still a decision point there, but it's much less friction than it would be. You're just learning one very simple interface. I'm going to schedule a job. I think it's perform later or something, and you just call this function, right? And it does what you want. And that's, I think, and database connection, same thing. Like, DHH in particular has talked numerous times in all the various podcasts and video appearances that he's done over the years that, he was really like Rails was a real response to all of these Java frameworks back in the day, where doing anything like that, like connecting to a database, was something you would spend a very long time doing, and it did nothing to do with there was no differentiating fact. You weren't like building your app, you were spending time doing the thing that everybody else has to do, that isn't special, isn't important, isn't unique to your product. It's just setup work, right? And I think there's a real, I think, benefit to combining things together into a tasty meal or into a tasty framework. As you were sort of teeing this up just now, it made me realize just how many times in sort of software development history there have been these, I think, two competing ideas where, the Unix philosophy of, small tools and small sharp tools, I think, right? So instead of having, a single binary that has all the commands in it or all the tools that you might want to use, there's individual executables, ls, and why can't I think of another ps, right? All these smaller Linux tools that do these individual jobs. And the thing that kind of connects them together is pipes, right? You can pipe output from one to the other, things like that. That was a pretty revolutionary concept. And that's kind of, so there's that side of it, right? Small, sharp tools, everything's a small little module. And then you have to wire them together as the end user. Or the other side of that, which is, the entire thing put together for you, all of the pieces working, smoothly together, where you don't have to do a lot of wiring. You just kind of do what you came there to do in the first place. So I'm thinking specifically of like Linus Torvalds, creating Linux. He created Linux partly as a response to his professor back in his college days, who was creating an operating system called Minix. And Minix was very much small, sharp tools with lots of little pieces to it that worked together. The kernel, for example, was broken up into multiple pieces, if I'm remembering correctly. And Linus looked at that and he said, that's ridiculous. That's going to be a huge nightmare to maintain. I'm going to design an operating system where the kernel is like just one giant piece of code. Like it's just, the whole thing is in one binary, essentially. I'm describing this incorrectly, but it was all designed together versus all designed separately. And we've kind of seen, right. I mean, nobody even knows what Minix is because Linux has been such a success, right? Or the concept of doing this at Apple too, where, Steve Jobs in particular was really an advocate for, I'm going to make, the operating system, like the company makes the operating system and the hardware and the firmware and everything together. And all of that works seamlessly together. I mean, I get notifications on my phone and my watch and my iPad, they all come together, right? There's like a unified development environment for all these things. Like it's all sort of under one roof and all works well together because the company has put a lot of emphasis behind making that work together. Whereas in Android, right, that's a lot different. You have different types of phones made by different manufacturers. There's different software, different operating systems. It's all different. It's all sort of mishmashed together. So that I think is one of the central sort of, what is the word I'm looking for? Well, one of the central dichotomies, I suppose, of the software world. There's the dichotomy of all together or all separate, right?
Right. And the issues you have with that, because if you make that decision, if you decide to go with a single tool, it has to do everything. It has to be a duck. It flies, it walks, and it swims, but it doesn't do any of those good, right?
Well, I think that are you talking about like the where you have to wire things together idea, or
when you have a duck, the duck does everything, but it's not the fastest walking, it's not the fastest swimmer.
Oh, I see.
It's not the best flying bird, right?
Yes,
Um,
but it works. It
but it
is a
works.
duck.
Yes.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
It isn't a duck and then all of a sudden its wings fall off and it, falls through the air instead of being able to fly. Yeah, and you had mentioned sort of the JavaScript ecosystem and just how fragmented that is. And I think, a lot of web developers, I think, understand that pretty implicitly, right? There's just there are so many. If you're starting a new, and I think this is changing a little bit now, but like it has been historically in the past, that if you wanted to start a new JavaScript project, doing so was really difficult. If you wanted to, again, there are some frameworks now. So Fresh is a JavaScript framework that does a lot of this sort of batteries included stuff that Rails does. Um, Bun is a JavaScript runtime and a bundler, right? It's lots of stuff in the same binary. Dino as well. So there's lots of, I think, there's a shift happening, or at least there was a couple years ago in the JavaScript community, where a lot of the sort of benefits of an Omakase framework have sort of started to creep into JavaScript. But I think to a large degree, we are still, especially as Rails pertains to the front end, or as the front end pertains to Rails, there is still a lot of fragmentation going on. And one of the big problems that engenders, or that happens as a result of that, is that if you want to this is true even of non-Rails JavaScript projects. If you want to upgrade something, let's say you want to move to Webpack 6 from Webpack 5, then sure, you have to upgrade Webpack, but you also have to upgrade all the little individual plugins that you're probably using for that. And you have to rely on the community to produce new versions of those plugins. And even when that's finished, there's also the possibility that they haven't considered some other piece of your stack that, wasn't a problem before, but now is a problem. And like all the stack traces that you're looking at, that they spit out these unintelligible error messages, and the stack trace points to a transpiled module somewhere in your node modules folder. Like you can't even really look at the code for what's happening behind the scenes. It's all been transpiled and minified and whatever else. And maybe it's a CJS module, maybe it's an ES module. I mean, sometimes it's it's one of the other, or maybe that's where the error comes from, is because it's not using anyway. So all of these multiples upon multiples of like levels of indirection and build steps, and right, it becomes impossible to upgrade things. So there's a cost to all these small tools. It's not just that they don't. It's hard to get them wired up together at the beginning. It's also hard to debug them when they fail, and hard to upgrade them when you want to go to the next version. So yes, I'll step down off the soapbox now, but that was part of my talk.
Yes. I think that you mentioned Unix, and I think that one of the reasons Unix has been successful is, even though they have specialized tools, they have the pipe to connect them. That is a standardized way to connect them, right? And I don't think we have that on JavaScript, right? It's a similar situation that I used to have with WordPress, where WordPress became this, we're the smallest CMS possible because you have a lot of plugins that you can connect and do extend it however you want, which kind of makes sense. But then eventually, after you add a significant number of plugins to do what you needed to do, you start having dependency issues between one plugin and the other, right?
Yes, right.
And at that point, then what you have is a problem that only happens to you at your particular configuration, right?
Exactly.
Very difficult to debug. Where when we go with Rails, even though we have James and we have the similar system of, let's call it plugins, or even though they're not plugins, but we have a shared, on the community, we have a shared set of gems that we use. So we have a similar shared experiences and similar shared problems, right? And we don't have that problem of compatibility as much as possible, because Rails give us a unified way to do things, right? And I think that's the issue with JavaScript, is there is every plugin, tool, framework, whatever you call it, they specialize on one thing, and they say, I don't care about the rest, and I don't have any intention to facilitate the communication with everything else, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, that's right. And I think, the benefit of a framework like Rails where or the key innovation, maybe I would say, or it's not even an innovation. The one of the key like aspects to Rails, like why it works, why people still use it, why I would still continue to use it over the JavaScript stack, um, is because of these interfaces that it defines, right? So one of the best things about Rails is that if I want to write a plugin for it, if I want to write, I have a library called Rux, which is like a template system for Rails. It's like a or it's like JSX, but you can write it in your Ruby templates instead of or your ERB templates. It's like it replaces ERB, and I can write a plugin for Rails for the like template handling system in Rails and stick that in because every template handler in Rails works the same way. There's an interface that's defined for each. I can call like actionView.register template handler or whatever it is and pass in the file extension and then the class that I define that that responds to certain methods, and when those methods get called by the framework, the template gets transferred, compiled into Ruby code, and then that's delivered to the that's written to I think it's actually stuck into a big, like dynamically evaluated module, and that's what actually renders the templates. But all of that stuff, or that I don't have to worry about how Rails actually renders the template. I just have to provide this class that knows how to transpile the template into Ruby code and then give that to Rails. And that level, that sort of like ability to plug and play things, and the ability to have known interfaces between my code and Rails code is a real benefit for someone designing a plugin for a system. And all the lifecycle hooks, if you're defining a Rails engine, for example, you have all these hooks like before configuration and before initialize and after initialize. Like all of these things are points into which you can hook things in, right? Active Record is another example of a system that or a sub framework of Rails that gives you the ability to talk to a database, but I can use just the regular Active Record API, and whatever database it's talking to, I know the Rails will take my Ruby code and compile that into SQL statements, and that gets shipped off to the database. So it's lots of these little areas of the framework that give you like developers, but also individual like Rails like programmers who are working on a Rails app to hook in their own behavior. And that's something that just isn't really present in the JavaScript. I mean, yes, like certain JavaScript libraries will provide you hooks and whatnot. There's abilities you can, for example, in Storybook, I can say I want to, decorate my component with another component, or I want to add these parameters or whatever. But like that, I don't think that's nearly as well fleshed out as it is in Rails, and it certainly hasn't been thought of from an ecosystem-wide perspective. So if I want to wire, that's why it's hard to wire things together, because you have to sort of force them together in some cases, and they're not designed to work together because they never considered that somebody might want to use them in that way. And I'm not saying that like Rails is perfect at this, but I think it provides more of those hooks and more of those abilities to hook things together because it was all designed together. So Active Record's designed to work with multiple databases because, that was a need at the time. Like they needed to connect to Postgres and MySQL. And actually, I think SQLite that was the first database that was available with Rails. You don't have to use the other two. In development, you use SQLite. So like all that stuff existed, like I think from the beginning, and that point, like now we've got, JRuby comes along and they want to be able to hook into, use the JDBC adapters, right? So they can just do that because all those interfaces are defined for them. So yeah, I think that's like a really key thing. Like one other example I'll mention there is like ViewComponent, which I have worked on in the past. I don't know if I would call myself a maintainer at this point. Pseudo maintainer of ViewComponent. And, in my opinion, like the key innovation from ViewComponent was not actually the library itself. The key innovation of ViewComponent was this render in method that now exists in Rails, like Rails 6.0 and I think 6.1 and beyond. There's this render in method that when you're in Rails, if you call render and you pass it an object that responds to render in, that method will get called instead of going through the normal sort of like Rails like rendering pipeline. So this has enabled stuff like Flex to exist, and I'm sure other things in the future. Flex, PHLEX, right? The other another very popular component framework for Rails. Those are
the
all
other
that was
flex.
possible because of render in, and that's now an API that's part of Rails, enables these other paradigms of UI construction that didn't exist before.
Right. I think that these standardized APIs that allow us to plug in and out things, it's the key, because if you build a component, another person build a component, or a gem that extends the templates, you're all going to use the same APIs, right? So
That's right.
It's easy to debug. It's a problem on the Rails side. It's a problem on my gem side, right? And and you're going to have this shared experience with everybody that has built a new template engine, right?
That's right. Yeah. It's just, and again, the real, the thing about that is that they were all these APIs were designed, in the same code base all together. So there wasn't this wiring together of different tools from different creators. It was all sort of under one roof, right? Like Rails has all these little sub frameworks, and they have these hooks and whatnot. In some cases for each other, like Active Record, or like Action View. No, sorry, what is it? I think it's Active Support actually provides
Active
this
support. Yes.
There's like a hook, like when the Active Support provides this hook, like when certain libraries are finished loading, it'll call your callback. A lot of different parts of the internals of Rails use that stuff, or use that feature. But then you as the developer can also use it. Like once Active Record is finished loading, then run this callback, right? And you also, as like ViewComponent, for example, also publishes an event. Like whenever it's finished loading, it will also fire like a ViewComponent loaded event, right? Which then callbacks can register to receive that. So that kind of thing is also just like possible because the framework was all designed together. I think in the JavaScript world, right, you wouldn't even have a need for that because there aren't any nothing is collaborating with you. Like you're working on your one queuing library, or you're working on your one whatever, and you're not designing to an interface. You're just designing to an API for your end users because you expect them to use it by itself, or you expect them to use it, without, and you don't consider sort of what else they might be using. And I'm kind of painting the JavaScript community with a broad brush here, because obviously there are lots of people doing lots of really great work in that ecosystem, and lots of people I think also like trying to make these tools work together. So I'm not trying to throw them all under the bus. Like there's absolutely great work being done, great people. I'm not trying to disparage that at all. But that's kind of that's what I've seen in the past, is these tools that were not designed to work together because they don't have these shared APIs, because they were not developed together.
Yes. I think that there are great people. I agree with you. There are great people doing great. The quality of the tool has been improving year over year.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, but I share that same experience of the user experience of developer experience.
Yes, the developer experience. Yes,
developer experience.
Right.
Yeah. Regardless of the intentions of the people that are working on the tools, right? And
for sure.
we can criticize very easily that there is no integration, but it's very hard to build that integration as a solo open source creator of a JavaScript library or whatever, or tool. It's very hard to get that consensus, right? So
of course, yes, that's right.
Yeah. I don't think it's for lack of trying. I was frustrated when Angular 1 was deprecated.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Because we had Angular 1 applications, and then it's like, Angular 2 is no longer backward compatible.
And wasn't it totally different than Angular 1 too? So like you have to rewrite everything basically
It was a complete different API. Actually, the Angular 2 was called, I don't remember, but it was another framework name, and they kind of took the name for Angular.
Interesting.
And I feel that that's a lack of appreciation of everybody that is using the tools and the frameworks. And I think that has the APIs on Rails has been more stable and has been maturing slowly, but with this continuity, right?
Yes.
So that's a big difference, right? I mean, you could have issues of migrating from 5 to 6, or I've done migration from Rails 1 to 6 all the way, on different projects, right? So I've been there. From 2 to 3 was a big big change, right?
Huge jump, yeah.
Yeah, but still, they they were like, we're sorry, but that we have to make so many changes, but it's needed,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um,
Right.
so that level of appreciation is what I'm saying, right? Because
Yeah.
um, on on bigger corporation, maybe we don't have that issue, but on smaller startups, that they bet their their livelihood on that tool,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That becomes an issue, right?
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, upgrades are, I mean, I'm sure you've heard numerous times that, code is like when code is written for the first time, that's like only 10% of like, the effort involved in that code. Like there's also maintenance of that code, which is going to make up the other 90% of, because like code lasts for a long time. It's written once, but it's read and maintained, for potentially decades after that, right?
Right.
Yeah, and so the stability of those APIs can make a big difference. Yeah.
I think that I enjoyed the stability of jQuery,
Mm.
uh, and this is where my gray hair starts to show up, right? uh, because
I don't know what you're talking about. Your hair looks perfectly dark to me.
um, so I don't have it with me. I think it's on the other room, but I have a schnauzer. He's
Okay.
7 years old now, right?
Uh-huh.
So we got him when he was very small, right? 3 months old or so, and he had dark hair, and throughout the years he became whiter as me, right? So I feel we have that shared relationship of white
Yeah.
hair, and
Is he a JavaScript programmer by any chance? No.
I I name him Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Oh, there you go.
So yeah,
Awesome.
and my previous dog was another Schnauzer, which was
Mm.
killed by a road on the road. A car
Oh, I'm
stepped on
sorry.
it. So that was very
Mm.
traumatic. But
Yeah.
I call him Gandalf, right?
Oh, yes.
So I
Great
thought
name.
about new dog should be called Gandalf the Grey.
The Grave. Because he comes back from the
He
Balrog
comes
pit.
back, yeah,
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 right.
yeah. It's the same brand of dog,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
right. He's a Gandalf version 2.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So, but I thought, well, that's a little bit disrespectful of the first Gandalf. So we kind of
Sure.
switch it to another name, right?
Obi-Wan. Yes. No, that's awesome.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah, yeah.
great name.
So anyway, going back to jQuery, the
Yes.
one of the things that I like is that you could pretty much build snippets and tools and components that you could share through forums or whatnot, and they were like their own thing encapsulated, right? You could
Sure.
implement incorporate extensions and whatnot, and it was very easy to work with.
Mm.
So I like that idea, right? That
Mm.
that interoperability, right?
Mm.
Then when we went to other frameworks that didn't have this holistic approach, we kind of lose that, right? When we
Yeah.
went to React, which was supposed to be, I think of React as this, framework that was supposed to bring balance and,
Yes. Sure. Balance of the Force. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. So he did,
Yeah.
he went to the dark side, right?
Yeah.
Because now it
Yeah.
becomes this super long verbose thing, right? And we have the same
Yeah.
issues of intercompatibility of components, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think so. So before I say too much more on React, I have to say, because I get labeled as like an anti-React person if I'm not careful. I think React is really awesome. Like legitimately, I think React is very cool. It has enabled building, I think, types of applications that we wouldn't have been able to build before. I honestly believe that. And I think, or we would have been able to build them, but well, I think it's enabled us to build applications that we couldn't have been able to build because building them would have been too costly. I think they would have been too difficult to build because it would have just taken too much time and effort to build them. So it's enabled, true spa-like experiences. I think that that's a good thing. However, I also think that React is really good at React has brought a lot of really key innovations to the web space. One of them was reactivity, right? That's why it's called React. Where like I can have data, and when that data changes, the view automatically re-updates, and it does that, efficiently for the most part. So reactivity, I think, is sort of unquestionably like a good thing. Like having to the old way of doing things, which is part of like jQuery, of course. If you weren't using some of the cool templating stuff that jQuery had, if you were just using it to query an element and then update that element's properties or whatever, or attributes, that's the kind of sort of non-declarative, like very procedural programming that we all used to do, like in the pre-React days. If new data came in, you would query for a particular element by its ID or by its class name, and then you would fill its text content, or you would change an attribute, or you would replace its inner HTML or whatever. And that was how you did reactivity. It was all sort of manually done. And React really changed the game there, right? Like it was much more about like, okay, I've got this piece of data, I have a template, and it connects those two together. So now I don't have to worry about manually doing anything. It's all declarative. So, and that reactivity and that idea, passing props down, and the idea of components, by even just the idea of components, really, I think, revolutionized web development. Like, I don't think it's a exaggeration to say that. But I think that we've also now let React become. There are, of course, other component frameworks. There are other reactivity systems. Vue is a popular one. I guess Angular to a degree. But as with so many things that humans do, right? Like we've taken that good thing and just gone so hard on it that now it's terrible, right? Like we've ruined it by overuse. We've ruined it by just using it for everything and not thinking to ourselves, is this the right tool for the job? And I'm actually, I should back up and say, like, I'm not necessarily a big proponent of like, quote unquote, the right tool for the job, because that sort of presupposes that there is a rational choice to be made. Like at every point you might want to make a decision. Like people aren't choosing React because they actually think it's the right technology. They're choosing React because they've used it before. And this is true of Rails too. Like people use Rails maybe when it's not the right choice, because they've used it before, because they know it really well. I don't think that that's wrong. I think that's fine. It's going to help you move quickly. It's going to help you get your job accomplished. Without sort of having to learn a bunch of things along the way, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm losing you a little bit, but I'm hearing you. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Let's
see, where was I in that whole thing? Oh, right. So, talking about how React, we've kind of gone, off the deep end when it comes to React, because I think like one of my favorite quotes is from Alex Russell, who was a Chrome developer and now an Edge developer for Google and now Microsoft. And he does, he studies sort of latencies around the world, like how much JavaScript, how much CSS can we afford to, load within a certain time for even older devices. How can we reach the P75 of devices within 1 second, I think it is. And so he publishes these numbers on his blog every year. And he's also like a very, I think, sharp critic of React, but not just React, like JavaScript heavy front ends. He's very sort of against them because of how much they impact the ability of somebody on a low end, for example, Android device, to access a page, or even just, he also, and I think this is also true, just, a lot of these JavaScript front ends just break in these unexpected and strange ways that the developers sort of weren't expecting, and that result in these bad experiences for users, right? And again, I'm picking on React here because it's the most popular, but I think a lot of these frameworks are sort of are susceptible to these problems. One of my favorite quotes from him is he says, frameworks aren't delivering. The answer isn't a different tool. It's the courage to do engineering. And that just has really stuck with me because I think it really nicely encapsulates what I think is sort of one of the big problems with choosing React. And that is that if you're choosing it because it's popular, you're choosing it because you've used it before, you're not really thinking about your end user. You're thinking about your developer, and that's fine. But like your focus really should be on your end user. And yeah, I'm sure that there are people out there, companies out there who have designed very performant and very awesome, dynamic web experiences for their end users using React, using Vue, whatever. But because it's kind of the default choice, a lot of companies, I think, have reached for it, um, and have sort of suffered the consequences of doing that without sort of thinking to themselves, like, how is this going to impact my end users? How am I going to, deliver an experience that loads quickly and doesn't break for whatever reason? Whereas an experience that's powered with web technologies like HTML forms and HTML by itself and forms and HTTP response requests, like all that stuff is so standard and so bulletproof and so battle tested that like, you would probably in many cases just be better off if you just use those technologies instead of trying to make everything a spa with React, right? And I think that really takes some courage, right? They say nobody was ever fired for choosing IBM, I think is the phrase. These days, it's like nobody's ever fired for choosing React, right? But that's not really, a courageous, or like, that's not really thinking, there's no courage there to do engineering. That's just picking the popular thing. And I think that, again, we would be better off as an industry if we did more of the actual type of engineering that results in better user experiences than just choosing a tool because we've used it before because it has good DX, right? Like no end user cares about DX. They all care about UX. Of course they do. So, and I mean, I think anybody out there could probably point to a situation where they've been on some website somewhere and they've clicked a button and nothing happens, right? And as a developer, like I can look in the JavaScript console and I can see, oh yeah, there was they tried to reach out to an API somewhere and that request failed and there was no error handling involved on the page. And so it just nothing happens, right? But imagine somebody like, our parents potentially, or even just us, right? Like it's still, all these things impact all the users that may use a website. And a lot of this, if it was a button with, it wrapped in a form and there was a, post, it was a post form or whatever, that would have just worked, right? There wouldn't have been any need for JavaScript there. There wouldn't have been any, ability for JavaScript to fail in that scenario. It would have just been that normal battle tested, HTML, HTTP request response paradigm, and that would have, or cycle, and that would have, been much more, less prone to failure than the JavaScript version. So anyway, this is all, it all is it's very frustrating, right? Because I think, it's been, gosh, I've been in this industry for, I don't know, 16 years or something, right? Coming up on 16 years. And the web has been around in one form or another for probably more than 30 years. And we've had so long to fix these problems, and all we've done is made them worse, right? It's just frustrating to think about that. And so that's why I think like a lot of my focus these days has been trying to, think about like what's next? Like, what are we doing? If not React, then what are we doing for dynamic front ends?
So we had a little bit of internet issues, but we're back.
Yes, my home internet connection decided just to stop working. Shout out Comcast.
It's part of the whole experience of doing podcasting remotely.
Yes. Although Riverside, which is what we're using to record, I think records on each end locally in your browser, right? So there's not quality issues from the listener's perspective, right? It's all just like from our perspective.
Yes. The only thing we need to, I need to remember the guest is to leave the tab open for a little bit so the upload completes. Yeah.
Yes.
But other than
totally.
that, is good. Yeah. I had to call a few times to a guest that just closed and there was a few seconds left needed to upload. Right.
Yep. For sure.
But I think it's a trade-off worthwhile. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, not a bad trade-off at all.
Yes. So we kind of were talking about front ends, and I wanted to, take the opportunity to wrap it up with what are your recommended front end. I don't know if it's to say architecture, but approach, tools. What do you think is now the best balance of Omakase and Okonomi?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm going to open up my presentation. A bunch of recommendations that I made as part of my talk. It was like, I said opinions, kind of incoming, and then proceeded to sort of like list just a ton of opinions. And like, I do want to say not all of these are going to like make sense for everybody, right? But I do think like Rails, my big point in the talk was that Rails could probably, do make a lot of these same recommendations because, I think a lot of people would benefit from having a bunch of opinions as, front end opinions built into Rails, more so than they have right now. So let me actually just, yeah. So what I said was like, for a better time, use NPM. So my argument was that NPM is actually pretty good now. People used Yarn, I think, and PNPM a lot. And I think both those tools are also great. NPM is just nice because it's kind of the OG tool. I find it to be a little simpler than the other two, especially Yarn. It's just a good tool. It used to be terrible, and now it's much better. So I just say use NPM. I say use a build system. So even though Rails has kind of promoted this no build concept, I think no build works for like maybe 10% of the apps out there, and the other 90% are going to need some kind of build system. Like even if you wanted to have some TypeScript in your app, you would need a build system because no browser and Node. I think Node is getting the ability to understand and interpret TypeScript at some point, but that's not there yet. So even if you wanted to do something as simple as that, you would need a transpiler and therefore a bundler, a build system. Right. I said use Vite. So I really think a lot of the problems that at least I have experienced when it comes to bundling for the web, which includes a lot of history. So like not just bundling via Webpack, but also bundling just by delivering JavaScript to the front end via static files, maybe using the asset pipeline. Like I've gone through a lot of different phases, in my web development career, delivering assets to the browser. And, I would say none of those have been as easy as Vite. Like even delivering flat files to the browser was actually more complicated than just using Vite because Vite is so fast and so good at what it does. I have just had such a great experience with that. And I think like in the deck, I also talk about, show a couple of tweets from Dave Thomas, who was also trying to set up a new app and, used Vite and had a great experience with it. There's a Vite Rails gem that you can just drop into your app. You run like a single command, which sets it up for you. And then you just write TypeScript or you write JavaScript and it magically appears in your browser like it's like it's supposed to, and it handles everything you might want sort of out of the box. Like it's got TypeScript out of the box, which of course you can configure, but you don't really need to because it's very turnkey that way. I think it can also handle CSS, although I haven't personally tried that. But yeah, it's just extreme. It's just exactly kind of that's if you took nothing else away from my talk, I wanted you to take away that Vite is great and you should use Vite. I also say use PostCSS. PostCSS is like it's actually what Tailwind is built on. Tailwind is actually a CSS or PostCSS plugin, I think. PostCSS is just industry standard at this point. It's just really good at what it does. Processing CSS, flattening it in some cases, right? So if you're using nesting and things like that. So yeah, use PostCSS. Although I think eventually my sort of main or my sort of hope for CSS is that eventually you won't have to, bundle it at all, or you'll have to just bundle it, just, stick what PropChef does, like stick a digest on the end of it to keep the browser fresh, right? So it requests the next version if you change it. Because like CSS, the native CSS is getting so good that you almost don't need Sass. It's everything sort of already baked into it. There are going to be some things I think that maybe some people will want to use and continue to use, some things that are not sort of available in native CSS. But for most applications, I think it's so capable now, there's not really much reason to, or it will be very capable in the near future. You won't need to use something like PostCSS. I say use TypeScript. I think TypeScript is amazing. I really enjoy using it. Like, yes, there are definitely times where, depending on what you're writing, where you might run into the need to create some extremely long and hairy and hard to read type, but I've found that that's not very common and sort of only happens in libraries, not really applications. So use TypeScript. I think there's also like there's a big caveat to that, though, I would say, and that is maybe don't use TypeScript if you have a small team. I guess it depends on your preferences there. But I mean, I can tell you that like at GitHub, at Meraki, and then also previously at Quip, which all three of those were very large React code bases, TypeScript can really save you and help you understand your code base better. So I definitely recommend it. Just being able to refactor things is just amazingly nice. And other than that, I would say, just use the web platform, right? Like use web components, use Stimulus, use Hotwire. All these things are sort of built on top of the web, unlike React, which is kind of like trying to replace the web, right? I say also like avoid certain tools. So avoid import maps, like no build is very cool, but I just don't think that we're there yet. I think there's lots of sort of negative aspects to that most applications are not going to be able to use, or it won't be good for them. Don't use Webpack. Webpack, I think, had its day in the sun. I think it was fine when it came out or whatever, but it just introduces so much complexity to an application. And I personally have just spent days wrestling with Webpack config and trying to get things to work and getting opaque. It's half the reason that there are upgrade problems is because Webpack exists in so many Rails apps out there. Stop using Webpack, please. I beg of you, stop using Webpack. And then don't use a JavaScript framework. I think if you're going to use, if you're using web technologies like Hotwire, Stimulus, and I say web technologies. Those are not web technologies. Those are built on top of web technologies, though. They leverage the web in a way that like React and Vue do not, right? I think that 99% of applications out there, especially Rails applications, are not actual applications. They are they're document-based web pages, right? There's a request response cycle, and that's going to be fine for most of them. If you are truly building something that needs the level of interactivity, like Figma is actually a great example. If you're building Figma, then yes, you absolutely should use React. Even if you're building, I don't know, Gmail, or you're building something that's super like interactive, then for sure use React. But if you're not, and that's going to be like most of the applications out there, then don't use it, because it's going 99% of your page, 90% of your page is going to be static anyway. There's no reason to use a dynamic front end framework like React to render a blog, for example. Like you're just don't do that. Just render static HTML. Okay.
You save so much complexity by not using it.
You save so much, right? Yeah, I mean, and also like again, I'm not going to sit here and say that React is bad, because it's not. It's actually very cool. It's just that I think most applications do not need the level of dynamism that it gives you. Okay, I think that's pretty much it from the talk. So yeah, the takeaways are, what is it? Let's see.
You say
npm Vite. What's that?
npm TypeScript,
yes,
and PostCSS.
npm Vite, PostCSS TypeScript, Rails defaults. Yep. Avoid React. Right. Do engineering.
Yes. Yeah, and if you're building a React app, then it doesn't make sense to build it within Rails. You can build it as a separate app.
Sure.
And then you can have a front-end app, and a Rails can be a back-end API-based.
Yeah, for
app,
sure.
right? Yeah.
That's a totally valid architecture, for sure.
Yeah, and that makes sense when you're building a complex app like the one we're talking about at Cisco Meraki, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or at or even a GitHub, or many projects like that, where it makes sense to have a front-end team and a back-end team, right? But but if you're a one solo startup or a small team of 2 people, 3 people, then it makes more sense to what I called static HTML sprinkled with JavaScript.
Yes,
right?
That's right. Yes, totally.
Yeah, and that's
I think
good enough.
Absolutely. For a lot of applications, that's enough. Yes. Yeah. I used to work on the Primer team at GitHub, where we built ViewComponents and React components and like an implementation of the Primer design system. And there were definitely components that we were building, like the select panel comes to mind, that would have been much easier in React. They were honestly quite a pain to build with web components, because there was so much complexity, so many things they did, so many edge cases, right? That they weren't really well suited for something like Stimulus or something like web components with the JavaScript sprinkle approach, because you can't really render a template with a web component, or you can, but it's more annoying, and there's not like the same. You can render on the server, but then you also have to duplicate that same logic, on the front end to get the same behavior.
Right.
And so, that was much more annoying and difficult to build than it would have been in React. And so I think it'd be very cool if at some point we could get to a point where, again, I'm not anti-React. I think that some things, some apps maybe, but even just some small components might be better served. They need that reactivity. And so I think it'd be very cool if we adopted more, and I don't want to say islands architecture necessarily, but I want to say like stick with static HTML for the 90% of the page that needs it, and then render a single React component where it needs to be rendered rather than doing the entire page in React. And I know there's a lot of sort of barriers to doing that. Like React kind of takes over the whole page. And one of the reasons for that is because of this kind of prop passing approach. If you update, I think this is true. It used to be true. If you update the, HTML attributes on whatever element React is anchored to, that won't necessarily update the props in the component. So like you do sort of lose some of that reactivity. But also getting data out of it might be a little more challenging than if you were in React, the whole page was in React, right? But if I was going to sort of, think about like what could be improved for the future, that's one of the things I would think of, is like thinking about how we can get these little components to render here or there where we actually need React, and the rest of the page can be static. As it stands now, doing that I think would be quite heavy, right? Because you have, let's say you have one React component on the page, that's fine, but you're bringing all of React with you to do that. If you have another component on the page that is also a React component, needs to render separately, then that's another copy of React essentially running in the browser. So it's kind of expensive to do that now, but I would think that there'd be ways to make that better. So maybe one day we'll have that.
Yes. I think the dream is to have a nice isolated little environments where we can run these components, and then a standardized API that we can use to interact with it,
Yes.
whether data or events, and that way you can test that in isolation, which is kind of we don't have enough time to talk about a view component, right? But that's that concept of tested in isolation. I think that's great.
For sure.
And then that way you can still use the static HTML with JavaScript sprinkle around approach, but also you can, if you need some more elaborated, bigger components, right, where you have a lot of reactivity, then you can go with a more full-fledged framework, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, totally.
Yeah. Sounds great. Looking forward to see when that happens.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. So thank you very much, Cameron, for being here, and I'm looking forward to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Federico. Thanks so much for having me on and for letting me just wax so poetic about all these things, talk at length about them all. Thank you.